Good afternoon and welcome to our very first Water Mission Live. My name is Laura Lambert and I'm also a colleague at Water Mission, and I have the honor of serving as your MC today for our very first Water Mission Live. We have a very exciting agenda for you. It's very full for the next 45 minutes. You're going to get to learn about how Water Mission was founded. You're going to get to learn about our values as an organization, the why behind the work that we do. You're going to get to meet our CEO and President, George Greene IV. We're going to be sharing some exciting updates around how Water Mission is pioneering and innovating around solar-powered water supply around the world. And one of my favorites is our disaster response. You're going to hear some exciting updates around work that we've been doing for the last 20 years, but even work that we're currently doing right now as we speak. And so I'd like to welcome George up to the stage, our CEO and President. And we're going to welcome you, George.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Throughout the presentation today, George is going to be sharing some stories and some updates. In between each section, we will be taking some questions and answers from you, the audience. And so you'll see a Q&A button in the Zoom. Please feel free to post questions. We'd love for you to share even where you're calling in from. So send your name, where you're calling in, and your question, and we will try to get to all of those today. For the questions that we don't get to answer, we will be answering them, George will be answering them, and we'll be sending them out with the recording after the event. So thank you, George.
Thank you, Laura. So yeah, it's great to be with you guys in this kind of inaugural live event, and our desire with this is to share a little bit more about who we are and have a series of these. And as we think about where we would want to begin with a series like this, it makes sense to begin at the beginning. So as we think about how are we founded and what are our values and what are some of kind of the foundation level things about who Water Mission is. And so as we think about the very beginning, it actually goes back to 1998. Hurricane Mitch, which is what you see in this graphic that's on the screen, hit the country of Honduras, and it was the worst recorded disaster in the history of the country of Honduras. Most people think of hurricanes, they think of high winds and storm surges. The issue with Mitch was actually rain. They experienced over 75 inches of rain over a 6-day period. And the impact of that was that somewhere around 7,000 people were killed kind of instantaneously. And then coming out of that, about 1.5 million people lost their homes. And the impact to Honduras was huge. Bridges washed out, infrastructure destroyed, entire sections of cities washed away, and these little tent cities just kind of popped up along the roads that still existed. And as this was transpiring in Honduras, my parents, George and Molly Greene, were running their for-profit business here in Charleston, South Carolina. And my father speaks to just feeling God put a burden on his heart that he needed to do something about this disaster. Ultimately, what that ended up manifesting itself into was mobilizing the resources from their for-profit company and building 6 emergency skid-mounted treatment systems. And this picture is actually showing some of the images of how those things came together. It's actually my father in the middle with the circle around his face. There's also 2 of the skid-mounted systems that they ultimately built from scratch. Water treatment's not that complicated. They actually went out to local Home Depot and Lowe's and the hardware stores and just bought the pieces and pieced them together to build these things using volunteers from their company. Here are the other 4 systems, and you might note getting loaded into the back of a pickup truck. This is done in a disaster relief effort. This is getting it out the door as fast as possible. Amazingly, we had a door open to get on a U.S. Air Force plane. This is a C-5 Galaxy, and 3 of the systems loaded on this and then flown directly into Honduras, including a team of volunteers to go and install these things. And this is one of the systems in the back of the pickup truck that was then going out into these communities that were impacted. Again, here's one of the systems that was a part of that. And then this picture, which is one that a number of people have seen, we call this picture the first sip. This is my father giving my mother a sip of safe water from one of the first systems that was installed. And the story behind this is that as water started to flow, the people in this community were actually still afraid to drink the water. The water that was the source for this treatment system was referred to by the locals as the Rio de Muerte, the river of death. And they were calling it that because of the things that they had seen floating down the river. And my father and mother, when they got this system up and running and realized nobody was drinking it, they looked at each other and they said, we're going to have to show that this is safe to drink. And so this image is kind of an iconic image, again, predating digital photography of just the initial foundation and roots of how we got started. This experience opened my parents' eyes to the global water crisis. Where an estimated 2 billion people don't have access to safe water. As my parents experienced this and kind of had their minds starting to wrap around this, they also had their hearts broken with this idea that there's 2 billion people, a third of the global population, that don't have access to safe water. And it's something that we don't even think about in this country because we've had access to safe water in this country for over 100 years. And so having their hearts broken, looking at this need, and then feeling compelled that they needed to do something about it, ultimately they felt God was calling them to sell their for-profit business, and Water Mission was kind of born out of this situation. Today we describe Water Mission as a Christian engineering charity. And those kind of 3 key words are part of our elevator pitch for who we are. Christian means faith-driven. We believe that God put us here for a purpose, and He expects us to do something with the gifts and skills that He's blessed us with, and we see that we're living those things out, or living out that expectation by helping people with access to safe water and sanitation solutions. Engineering is kind of an odd word, but it also speaks to the intentionality around how we have grown Water Mission and how we've built Water Mission. And this idea that we're looking to make sure that we have the right people with the right skills to address the problems that we're trying to address. And then finally, as a charity, essentially that we exist through donations. The people that we serve don't have the ability to help themselves. And so as we think about how we were birthed and with this mindset, some of the foundation level things that you think about are things like vision, mission, and values. And so starting out with Water Mission's vision, and as we think about where we would start with that, I thought it would be helpful to provide a high-level definition of what a vision is. And a vision is a picture of what we would like the future to look like. And so Water Mission's vision is that all people have access to safe water and an opportunity to experience God's love. And then following that is our mission, and that's how will the vision be achieved. And Water Mission's mission is to honor God by developing, implementing, and sharing best-in-class safe water solutions that transform as many lives as possible, as quickly as possible. And so as we think about those 2 kind of foundation level things for our mission and our vision, then the next thing that comes along behind that is our values. And our values are essentially how do we behave as an organization. As we think about the defining our values and how we behave, the best way that I've heard to think about it is to think about your mission is the road that you're on, the journey that you're on, and your values are the guardrails on either side of that road that help you stay on mission. And so as we think about how we behave and as we get impacted by things and we don't know how to respond to them, then we have the ability to bounce those off of our values and reflect if our response is going to be in alignment with our values. So Water Mission's values are love. We're compelled to love God and obey His command, to love all people and to share His love with everyone. Excellence. When we see God's creation, it shows us that He is a God of excellence. Because we are created in God's image, we are compelled to honor Him by striving for excellence in our relationships, our actions, and the quality of our work. And then our final value is integrity. Integrity, we honor God by being honest, behaving morally, and treating other people with respect, decency, fairness, and dignity. And so as we think about kind of how we got started with this initial disaster relief effort in Honduras to then how do we essentially come to be as a ministry with our mission and vision and values, these are things that have been set in place years ago that ultimately continue to guide us in this journey that we're still on today as we look to help people that need our help. So I think we're going to move into a Q&A session, and Laura's going to come back and join me now for a minute.
Thank you, George. And thank you for sharing just the story of the history of Water Mission. I think just an incredible testament to how the Lord has provided and blessed Water Mission for the last 26 years. And just excited to see what the next 20 years will look like. And so thank you to those of you who sent in questions on the Zoom chat. And so I want to take some time to go through that with George. Again, if you send in a question and we don't get to that right now, we will respond to that question and send it out when we send the recording as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the very first question for you, George. Is the global water crisis even solvable? It seems just very significant. You mentioned over 2 billion people that lack access to safe water. That number can seem massive and overwhelming. So is the global water crisis even solvable?
Yeah, so I think the best way to think about that, yes, it is a huge number. It's a third of the global population, and it can very easily be overwhelming. At the same time, that the statement that I made earlier, as we think about this issue, it's really not something that we think about in this country because it has been solved, and it's been solved in this country for over 100 years. There's another analogy that came to mind with this, and as we think about just how big this issue is and where do you start and what difference are we actually making as we think about doing a project that serves 1,000 people, but in the context of 2 billion people, that's a rounding error, and what does that mean? And I'm sure people have heard the story about the old man that's walking down the beach and there are seashells that are up and down, starfish, up and down the beach, and there's a little boy that's throwing them back in the water one at a time, and the old man comes up to the boy and says, why are you doing this? What difference are you possibly making in this? And his response back was, well, I'm making a difference for this one. And so as we think about individuals that we're serving that are no different from us, that are created in God's image just like us, this idea that this is a solvable crisis, this is something that we can do something about, and yeah, absolutely, we're going to continue to run hard and chase after ending the global water crisis.
And I think you're going to learn more about that today and how Water Mission is trying to demonstrate how that is solvable as well. So yes, it is overwhelming, but it is possible. So George, another question for you is, we learned a little bit about your mom and dad and just how Water Mission was founded in the last 20 plus years, but tell us a little bit about how you got involved at Water Mission. Did you have an experience similar to your parents where God called you to this organization and this work?
Yeah, so that's so I grew up in my parents' family business. I started working in the 4th grade, not by choice, in the summers. And a common question is, what possibly could you have done as a job as a 4th grader? And my job was cleaning toilets and emptying trash cans. And so yes, a 4th grader can do those kinds of things. And it was really, I don't know that there was necessarily a fully thought out plan with this, but as my parents' business grew, every summer I worked in that business, and I worked in different aspects of that business. And as I grew, I went into more complicated things and essentially kind of worked through a number of areas of that business. And when I was graduating from high school, I knew I was going to go to college, and my dad said, go get a degree in chemical engineering, and when you do that, you can come back and have a chance at joining us in the family business. And so I was about finished with my junior year and wrapping up my degree in chemical engineering when my parents came up and said that they felt God was calling them to sell the business. And what did I think of that? And it was kind of a very different perspective for me. And so I went through a period of discernment personally. In that conversation, they wanted to know how I felt about it. Ultimately, it in some ways, it kind of felt freeing, and it was a really exciting thing. At the same time, what does the future look like? And my parents sharing that they were going to start out on this journey after they didn't officially ask for my blessing with that, but it kind of felt like that, and I gave it. But then that was also, if you would like to join us, we potentially have a spot for you, but you need to determine whether you feel that you're called into this as well. And so I went through a season of discernment, and I had a handful of different opportunities coming out of college, but ultimately felt that this is where God wanted me to be. And so our official start, Water Mission, officially as an organization, is July 1st, 2001. That's when we received our nonprofit status from the IRS. And I know that date by heart because it's also the official start date for my employment. So I was one of the first 2 full-time staff And then my parents I didn't necessarily think of them as not being staff, but they'd always been volunteers and continue to be volunteers. The other thing I didn't necessarily think about was they were only donors, and that we better start looking at maybe we need to think about how we generate income and grow and fuel what we're doing. But yes, it's definitely been a wild journey to think about 2001, starting with 2 full-time staff and my parents, to today where we're somewhere around 800 global staff, and we have offices in 8 countries outside of the United States, and we have a number of volunteers that surround us and partners that are all over the place. So it's been quite a journey for sure.
It's an incredible journey, and I think I can probably speak on behalf of all of our staff, even globally, that we're honored to have you as our CEO and president, and just what an incredible testament that is, how the Lord called you as the son, but now as the CEO and president. So I think we're out of time for our questions, but again, we will get to those. And George is going to move to our next topic, which is innovation at Water Mission. So how are we leading the world in solar-powered water supply? So George, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So this was an interesting topic to kind of talk about. And as we think about who we are, described us as a Christian engineering charity, and maybe kind of keying in on that word engineering. Essentially, every project that we do, we design a turnkey solution based on what the unique needs are for the community that we're serving. And very quickly, as we got into this kind of work, we realized that we don't just have to be experts in water. We also have to, in order to see that happen, you also have to be experts in power. And one of the big issues that we run into is in the places that we work, there's often no power, and so we have to bring that with us. And so specifically with solar pumping, I'm going to talk about how we got into it, what that history was, but I thought it might be helpful to just get everybody on the same page in terms of how does it actually work. And so we have this fun little animated video that's kind of showing this is a rural village, and historically the way a water community like this would be served is you drill a well and you put a hand pump on it. Well, you have to drill where the water is, so that could be out of the community. And as we think about community members leaving, and then at the same time, there's also a limitation on how much water you can get out of a hand pump. And so the timing, so we can take the same well, or I call them boreholes in Africa, and we can mechanize it by putting a submersible pump in the well, and then we power it with solar. And then we pump water from the source to a high point in the community. And so this hill, and on top of this hill, we're showing how we have a very simple erosion chlorination process to be able to treat the water, and then treated water stored in these tanks before being gravity fed back out, not to just one access point, but to multiple access points within the community, where the entire community now has the ability to have access within a close distance to their homes. So this is actually a really simple application. What makes it complicated is kind of all the different parts and pieces and the operation and maintenance requirements on an ongoing basis. And then, of course, obviously these things are implemented in developing countries, which comes with its own complications as well. So as you think about solar pumping and how we got into it, I went back and pulled a couple of photos from, I think these are from around 2004. And I was walking around in a community in Haiti that's known as Gorman. And walking through this community, I could envision all the aspects of this project. I saw that we could drill a well, we could put a pump in it, and we could pump water into an elevated tank, and then we could gravity feed out into the community. What I couldn't get my head around was how this was going to run on an ongoing basis, because the only solution from a power standpoint that I knew that would be something that would work for this application was to put a generator in there. Generators are very effective solutions for power, but at the same time, the cost for fuel on an ongoing basis, the maintenance associated with the generator. As you look at these pictures, this is one of the most impoverished communities globally as we think about things. And so just trying to understand the financial ramifications, and I actually came out of this community feeling defeated. And that feeling of defeat was, I remember when I was going through school and getting my degree in engineering, one of my professors early on said that we were being trained to be problem solvers and solutions providers. And I felt defeated walking out of this community because I didn't have a solution that I could recommend that I had confidence in. I got back to the United States, and as I was kind of just mulling over these things, I had a volunteer that was really big into solar. And that volunteer actually put this image in front of me with an application that was showing a new technology around solar pumping. And so what you're seeing with this is solar panels that are directly hooked up to the pump, like what was in that video, pumping up to an elevated tank, and then this gravity feed out to access points. And I remember looking at this and saying, there's no way that this works. But at the same time, if there's any chance that it does work, it could revolutionize how we work as a ministry in allowing us to go into communities that otherwise we wouldn't necessarily have confidence that we could have a sustainable solution. And so we ended up buying one of these pumps and setting it up and testing it for 9 months to actually make sure it works before we went and put it in a community. And the only photo I have of that application is of the 4 solar panels that we set up on the roof of our facility that were powering that. And so this photo is actually from July 2006. And this is the initial solar pumping kind of venture that we got into here in Charleston to just kind of understand how does it work and what would that look like. And the good news is it passed the test with flying colors. And today we have implemented thousands of solar pumping projects. I want to highlight one in Tanzania in the community of Makere. And I want to start out by highlighting one of the residents of Makere. This lady, Maria, is one of the 23,000 people that lives in Makere. And I'm going to come back to her in just a minute. This is an aerial look at the community. We actually turned this project on back in July of 2023, and the component pieces, we drilled a well, called wells boreholes in Africa, powered it with solar. We pumped it to a high point in the community where we had a bank of erosion chlorinators, which is what you're looking at in the bottom right-hand corner of the image, storage of treated water in this 200,000 liter tank, just under 15 kilometers of distribution piping out into the community, and 35 access points throughout the community. So this is kind of seeing how that works in a bigger way in a community like this. One of the neat things with this installation was this fella, who is the Minister of Water for Tanzania, showed up for the commissioning. And in this experience, as he was with us, he actually shared a really inspiring quote. His comment was that this was the best project that he has seen in the 7 years that he's been with the Ministry of Water. This is the head of water for a country that has over 60 million people living in it, and just kind of speaks to the intentionality of how we've been built and how we look to live out our values of love, excellence, and integrity in the work that ultimately gets implemented. I want to come back to Maria because while it's great to get that kind of recognition, at the end of the day, what we're doing is to change the lives of people like Maria. Maria was walking 3 hours to go get water, and the water was contaminated before we did the project. And so our ability to give her back that time, to give her access to safe water, it's transformational. And again, seeing this kind of opportunity in thousands of projects. Over the years, we've gotten some recognition in solar pumping as well. We were asked by UNICEF to develop a design and installation guide. This is something that we're driving through our sister organization, the Global Water Center now. But it just speaks to the intentionality of our approach and who we are. And then this last slide is just a handful of some of the solar arrays. When I said thousands of 1,000+ projects, obviously that's not what's captured in this image, but to give you some scope and scale, it's definitely been something that we've invested heavily in, and we've been excited to see how it's been transformational in people's lives. So I think we're going to transition back into another Q&A session and welcome Laura back. And Laura, turn it back to you.
Thank you, and we are, because we've been getting quite a few questions in the chat box, so thank you. Go ahead and continue to submit those questions, and we will get to them. So, George, you've mentioned quite a bit about just Water Mission being an engineering organization, the work that we're doing around the world. Does Water Mission accept volunteers, and especially when it comes to engineering type support, and maybe even well drilling?
So the answer is absolutely yes. And if you go to our website, at the top in the, I think, the right-hand corner, there's a area you can click on that says Get Involved. And it has all kinds of different areas that include volunteer opportunities. when we think about how do you engage in a project like the one I just showed you, obviously there are limitations when we think about, that project took probably a year to implement. And so when we think about how does a volunteer engage in something like that, there are certainly long-term opportunities, but typically volunteers don't necessarily have that capability. So, when we look at what volunteer opportunities are available, we're kind of looking at in the best context and in the best setup for how it benefits overall what we're trying to accomplish. But we're delighted to have people engage, and we need more people as we think about the size of the crisis. It's huge, and we need as much help as we can.
So, George, similarly to volunteers, does Water Mission coordinate our efforts with other nonprofits? What is different about the work that Water Mission is doing that other organizations are doing similar work? What sets Water Mission apart? Do we coordinate with them? And where do we see the most need to be able to work together and collaborate?
Yeah, collaboration is a key part in everything that we do. Again, if you're on our website, if you want to look at the About Us tab, in that drop-down menu, there's a link that will take you to our partners. We have corporate partners, we have NGO partners, we have groups that we're members of, and yes, it goes all over the place, and we've been fortunate to have some amazing relationships as we think about all the things that take place. What's unique about Water Mission is we're wholly focused on water and sanitation. And so as you think about there are more needs than water and sanitation that are out there. When you think about education, when you think about medical needs, housing, there's a litany of potential things that people could plug into. Ultimately, we saw that the gifts and skills that God gave us had us uniquely positioned to really focus on water. And so that's where we've gone deep. And as we think about how we partner with other organizations, that's kind of the piece that we bring to the equation with essentially helping people that are in need.
So it sounds like, instead of trying to be all things to all men, we really want to be focused on water supply and sanitation and solve that.
Absolutely.
And I think just, when it comes to scale, from the founding of Water Mission to now, we've served over 8 million people. That's a significant number. That's huge. But as George mentioned, the crisis is much larger than that. It's 2 billion people. And so we have to be able to coordinate. We have to be able to collaborate. And we need more organizations to stand up and to solve this crisis alongside organizations like Water Mission.
Yeah, maybe it's worth a note that with that idea of collaboration, several years ago, we launched another nonprofit in our sister ministry that I mentioned earlier called the Global Water Center. And that's focused solely on collaboration and sharing of best practices, and definitely something that's worth checking out as well.
So another question, and this is from Phil from Texas. He is asking, what is Water Mission's approach to non-Christian communities who need help with clean water? Phil says, I know Water Mission is active in some Islamic communities, so for example, maybe Turkey and Pakistan. Does Water Mission attempt to convert the recipients?
Yeah, so we are a Christian ministry, and when we talk about the work that we do and what we do, when we do a project, we go into all kinds of communities and all kinds of different locations. Some of the country programs in disaster situations like Turkey, it's basically go wherever, and who the recipients are is going to be determined by who lives there, obviously. So maybe it's easier to just take it back to a country program. So we have full-time staff in Tanzania and in Kenya. We also have a number of initiatives that are in Indonesia. There are communities that we go and we serve that are predominantly Muslim. At the same time, as a Christian ministry, when we go into a community with water, we do have a local church engagement initiative where we look to work through the local church that is in the community to be able to serve the community as well. There are no faith requirements associated with a water project. If somebody is interested in that, that's great. If they're not, then that's their decision as well. But we serve all people with our projects, and that's kind of our process, and our thought is it's a free gift, and it's our effort to reach out and love and show God's love to these people.
Well, thank you, George. And I think we have time for one more question. This is Courtney from North Carolina. She's asking, how would Water Mission like to expand our programs and our reach in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, well, if you think about where we're working, we currently have programs in Mexico, Honduras, Peru, Uganda, Kenya, Malawi, Tanzania, and also Indonesia. And it's amazing to think about the scale of what we're doing today versus what we got started with 20 plus years ago. At the same time, our entire budget could be invested in a single country. And more is needed to continue to build out and meet the needs in those countries. And so our focus in the countries where we are is a regional focus, and then building and growing out of those. So as we see resources open, if that were to happen, the immediate focus would be on our current footprint and current proximity and growing the scale of what we do. There are huge needs associated with where we currently are rooted. And our ability to go raise resources to support those needs there's a lot that's being accomplished, but there's still a lot that still needs to be done.
Well, thank you, George. We are out of time for more questions, and so we're going to move to our next session, which is around disaster response. And we've learned how Water Mission is innovating and pioneering in solar-powered water supply. So this is really looking at permanent water infrastructure, water treatment, water distribution. But another significant arm of our organization that many of you might not even be aware of is our disaster response. And this is really where we're coming in immediately, quickly, and responding to whatever those needs are through water supply. So George, looking forward to getting an update from you on that.
Okay, my clicker's not working. If you can advance the slide. Yeah, so as getting back to disaster response, and as we think about how we got founded with the initial effort in Honduras, disaster relief is certainly something that we still are very much focused on. And we had a number of relief efforts in 2023. I wanted to highlight two of those that are very different, but also significant. And at the heart of disaster relief, it's where people's lives are impacted potentially on the line within a matter of hours is the kind of mindset that we need to be thinking about with getting in and establishing the flow of safe water. If you don't do that, that's where you see things like cholera outbreaks that can cause massive loss of life in a very short period of time. So starting out, I wanted to go to the Ukraine. Unfortunately, this is still a disaster relief effort for us that's going on 2 years when we first got started. We have somewhere around 70 water systems that have been in place. We have treated and distributed over 100 million liters of water in the impacted area, and are continuing to just run hard and support needs in the Ukraine. As a way to kind of help people understand the issue, I wanted to go back. This is about a year and a half old, this social media post. And this is a photo of an artesian well, so a naturally flowing fountain in the southeastern city of Mykolaiv, Ukraine. And if you notice, there's a line that's kind of wrapped around the image here. These are people that are waiting in line to get water. Mykolaiv is a city of about 500,000 people that essentially lost complete access to water. And so when something like that happens, an image like this is essentially what you see. I went to Google Maps and actually found this location, and so you can see the actual well is on, or the artesian fountain is on the left, and then that red place marker zooming out. Again, Mykolaiv is 500,000 people. It's a big city, and they're right on a river. That river is brackish and creates some issues with how do you treat that as well, which also kind of speaks to the enormity of the issue. Continuing to zoom out. What I've overlaid here for you is the actual supply line for Mykolaiv of fresh water that they were treating. They were actually sourcing water from the Dnieper River, which is off on the right-hand side of the image. And as this war started, the front line moved past the intake of where this pipe and where the water source was started. And as you can imagine, it was also a strategic thing that was targeted, and this supply line was actually blown up, which is how the city lost complete access to water on an interim basis, and also speaks to the need for our ability to go in and provide access to safe water by treating water. These are a handful of pictures of the 70-plus systems that we have installed. And this is actually a map that shows all of the installations that we have kind of approximate. We're obviously trying to not get too specific with these things, but essentially we're kind of running along the front line of where these needs are and continuing to support needs and continuing to chase hard after supporting efforts in the Ukraine as well. The other application that I wanted to talk about that happened last year was flooding in southern Malawi. And this is a little bit different because Malawi is actually a program where we have staff and we're uniquely positioned to be able to respond and meet needs. And as you look at these images, you know, these are things that are beyond the scope of anything that we've likely ever seen or experienced or ever will experience. But to, again, put in perspective what you're looking at here, an estimated 500,000 acres of land were flooded, and somewhere around 300,000 livestock were lost. Cholera outbreaks ensued, and I've actually got a video that was taken during this time, again, to kind of bring some of these things to life. I'm going to hit play on that now.
Just arriving into Bangula with our first load of people taken from a small hill in the middle of the village over the other side of the big elephant marsh. This is the M1 highway. The M1 highway that connects Malawi to other nations. But today we are boating. There's the famous Partners restaurant, not Partners in Harvest, but they took our name. It's such a good name. So these folks will head to the displaced camp. And we'll see what happens from there.
So I don't know if you picked up on some of the things that were shared with that, but he literally said that they picked these people up on a hill that was surrounded by water. And one of the things that also I think is something that's unique is, you know, in developing countries, when disasters happen, people don't expect that there are people coming to help them. And so you think about what was going on in these people's heads. They probably had no hope as far, you know, what's going to happen next. And literally a boat shows up, and they have the ability to hop in that boat. And then he shared that they were being taken to a displaced people camp. So there were over 300 camps that were formed in the aftermath of this flooding, serving 183,000 people. And that's where these folks were headed after they had essentially lost everything, their homes, leaving that, and were basically just trying to survive. This is one of those camps. It's called Chikuzi, and the population of this camp was somewhere around 6,300 people. And if you look at this image, you can kind of get a sense of just the chaos of, you know, just landing in this place and trying to figure out what your next steps are and just how hard life is and the things that you've already experienced. When you think about the importance of water, Chikuzi was being served by a hand pump, and I recognize this image is kind of hard to understand what's going on, so I've put a little graphic in here to show you where this hand pump is, and also an image off to the side so you can see a hand pump is pretty straightforward and how it works. You pump the handle up and down and water comes out. At the same time, just to give you do a little math for you, this is the only water source for this location. At best, you can get somewhere around 900 liters per hour of flow out of a hand pump. So again, at best, if you then pump that hand pump for 24 straight hours, which again isn't practical, but again, best case solution or scenario, you could get around 21,000 liters out of that. And if you're looking to distribute 10 liters per person, then you could serve at best a little over 2,000 people. The camp population is over 6,300. So you have essentially 4,200 people that don't have water, and that's the best case scenario. And when you think about not having water, this is where you see things like fights break out at the water source. And so when we talk about coming in and providing access to safe water in an application like this, it's to mitigate conflict, and then on top of that, it's safe water, and then it's in an abundance where you've got people that have essentially been rocked to their core and lost everything that they own, and potentially loved ones as well, and trying to regroup and respond to that. It's a really, really important thing to make sure that safe water is flowing as well. In addition to that, as a Christian ministry and also uniquely positioned in Malawi, we were able to roll out a biblically based trauma healing program. And so as you think again about what these folks have gone through, the conflict, the loss, how do you start the grieving process? How do you start to just go through and unpack and heal from what you've experienced? What about forgiveness if there are people that have wronged you in a way that is potentially unimaginable? That we have the ability to come in and minister to folks. This is actually a photo from a biblically based trauma healing session that we actually rolled out as a part of the relief effort in Malawi in response to the disaster that was happening as well. So kind of unique, two different perspectives, and again, just kind of core of who we are and who we've grown to be as a ministry. So, and I think we're going to move into another final Q&A session and Laura's going to come back and join us as well.
Thank you, George. And yeah, I think just looking at some of the pictures and the videos that you shared with us, it's, so many disasters that are taking place every year, and it's very common, I think, to easily become fatigued, or they call it compassion fatigue, and we can become desensitized to some of these things that are happening. And so just being able to see it and hear about what Water Mission is doing, it just brings that back to life. And so I appreciate that reminder today that these are real people and these are real places. And so we've got a few questions that have come in. One, specifically what you touched with a little bit earlier, but this is from one of our listeners in Washington was asking, how do you local churches help after disaster? And how does Water Mission support them? So if we work through a local church, well, how do they respond in the aftermath of a disaster? And how do we work with them?
Yeah, so, the local church, and historically, relief and aid and charity has always flowed through the local church. And so when we think about the value of the local church and just having that local presence, knowing the community, knowing the regions, there's just having that kind of local knowledge, there's tremendous value in that. What we have the ability to do is to come in and engage with groups like that to kind of point us to the greatest needs, and then to be able to use the specific gifts and skills that we have with the focus on water to be able to then come in and meet those needs. At the same time, the ability to support the work of the local church, how does the church respond to a disaster like this? Local churches where we're working don't have trauma healing programs that are just sitting on the shelf with a how-to program that they're going to roll out, or even thinking about that kind of stuff necessarily. And so our ability to come in and provide those kinds of resources, provide training, and provide materials and support is really kind of how we see that work best. Every situation is unique and different, and so there's no real cookie-cutter type answer for that, but at the same time, hopefully that allows people to get their heads around what that might look like.
You're right. And I think it's also just important to remember that the local church was there long before Water Mission.
And they'll be there when we leave.
Long
yes.
after Water Mission.
Yes.
And so it's imperative that we work alongside
Yes.
the local church. George, we've got somebody who's actually joining us from Kenya. These are real people that are sitting in these questions. He says, I'm greatly impressed by what Water Mission is doing. I've formerly been working in one of the humanitarian agencies in Kakuma, this is in Kenya, and I witnessed good work that this Christian organization is doing, Water Mission. He asked, will this presentation be recorded and can I get a copy? We would say absolutely yes, you'll get a copy. You'll get a copy of the presentation and all of the questions. And then follow on to that, they are asking that there's a lot of pipes behind us. We have a really great backdrop today on the screen. And so the question is Water Mission's headquarters an office, or is it actually a working laboratory or a factory?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and certainly would welcome people come and see it firsthand. We do have an office here, but it is not just an office. We have a research and development area that's actually behind me, and some of the things that we're doing with regards to research and development are actually in the background. So when we think about solutions, I mentioned solar pumping earlier, we don't just go and put these things into communities. We have to understand how they're going to work and how they need to be supported, or how do they not work. And so there is definitely a testing aspect of things that happens here. The other thing too is we actually have products that we build for disaster relief and also for some of the community development projects that we do. And just to my left is a manufacturing operation that we have all kinds of different things that are going on a daily basis. And then additionally, as we respond to disasters, in order to respond, you have to have equipment to be able to respond when the disaster happens. how we got started with Hurricane Mitch, we were not a disaster relief organization. We were trying to figure that out. And when you think about having to be able to respond within a matter of hours, that means you need to have equipment ready to go, pre-positioned and out the door. So we have all kinds of things like water treatment systems, filtration systems, generators, and other things specifically for disaster relief efforts that are pre-positioned here, and we have some of those pre-positioned in our country programs as well that allow us to be able to go and respond when disasters happen and be as fast as possible. So very observant and love this kind of backdrop as well, and thank you also for the international presence and tuning in from overseas.
Right. And to add to that, if you're ever in the Charleston area, we would love to host you at our offices in Charleston. And so you're welcome anytime to stop by and visit the office. We even have a water quality laboratory here and the warehouse where everything is shipped. So you'll be able to see that as well. George, we've got time for one more question. And I think this will kind of lead into our closing. But was there someone that you've met in one of the communities that you visited over the years whose story really jumped out to you?
Yeah, there are countless stories, but one of the first ones that ever stood out to me was in a community in Haiti, and the walk to go to fetch water was a mile plus long walk, and it was rocky terrain that was uphill, and it was a workout. And as I was walking this route to go check out the water source, and again, kind of looking at what the needs were and what we would propose as a project, there was this young child that was carrying his water container, and he didn't have shoes, and his clothes were hanging off his back, and it was just kind of a heartbreaking summary of the global water crisis when you think about the burden that falls on the shoulders of primarily women and children. It's just unimaginable, and we're so fortunate that it's not something that we have ever had to deal with in this country. And if we had that experience, I think the response in this country would be even greater as we realize the impact that comes with that. But yes, these are real people that we're serving, and as we think about why are we here, what's our purpose, that there's an expectation that we do something with the gifts and skills that God's given us. In reaching out and helping people that need it.
Right. Well, thank you, George. I appreciate the time and the stories that you were able to share with us today. So thank you. Just always a privilege to get to know people and get to know people by name and also hear stories of the work that's happening around the world. And so many of this work would not be possible. I think we've seen the Lord's provision over the last 20 plus years. It wouldn't be possible without friends and colleagues and supporters like you. And there's so many different ways that you can get involved at Water Mission. And when I think about the global water crisis, I think it doesn't matter how old you are or where in the world you live, you can do something. We've seen young kids get involved to raise awareness, and we've seen really, really old people get involved to support this work. And so there on the screen in front of you, you'll see ways that we would love for you to come alongside us. We want you to pray with us. We want you to share about Water Mission on your social media. Tell your friends and family about what you learned here today. So you can go to watermission.org/get involved. There's a number of ways that you can join us. So we'd love to actually see you back here again in September. So this was our very first Water Mission Live, but we're going to be doing another one in September. And we're actually going to be taking you to Honduras with us. We're going to be sharing a short film on the work that is going on in Honduras. So please stay tuned and save the date for September as well. We do have a survey that's going to show up on your screen at the end of this, and we'd love to get your feedback on how this Water Mission Live went today. What were the things that were really interesting to you and fascinating to you, and what were some of the things that maybe you wish that we had touched on? We would like to continue to do these events with you as well. Because we are a Christian engineering organization, I would love to take the time to close us in prayer. And so if you want to stay online and join us, let's pray. Lord, I just pray that you can bless us today as we leave here. Lord, give us passion that you provide for us. Convict us, Lord, to be your eyes and your ears in this hurting world, Lord, so that we can be motivated to be your hands and your feet, Lord, so that we can do something. Lord, we want to be able to do something that will bring peace and healing that can transform lives for eternity. And Lord, so we pray all of these things in your Son's name, Jesus. Amen. See you all in September. Thanks, everybody.